Well, welcome, friends. This is Paige Klingenpeel, your host of Embracing Your Season. And we're so glad that you're joining us today. We are glad that you are with us. And we just hope that you're having an amazing 2025. We just started the year, so I hope it is encouraging. I hope you feel equipped and just loved. I think that's the best thing that we can walk away with in 2025 is just feeling the love. So we want to introduce our guest to you today. But before we get started, I have to check in with my producer, Mike Segovia. How are you, Mike?
Paige, I'm doing good, and I can't believe it's already like the end of January. The other day I was writing a check. Wait, do people still write checks? I mean,
They do. Well, occasionally. I mean, it's for the old folks. I mean,
well,
not that I'm calling you old, but
I'm getting a little long in the tooth, but and I kept writing 2024, and I go, it doesn't feel right to write 2025, and then I thought, wait a
yeah,
second, we're already 25 years into,
yeah.
and then I started getting depressed. So I had to calm myself down, got myself a Coke Zero, and I was good.
Perfect.
But
Love it.
But time is flying by, Paige. This is
It
nuts.
does. It does. It really does. And I am, let me say, I am excited that we'll be moving out of the winter season, hopefully soon.
Yes.
But you're right. It does take a minute, to realize we are in a new year. And that is a cool thing because we can start a new perspective. We can start new goals, new habits, all the things. I love that. Even that's biblical, right? Like just
Right.
seasonal things of life. And so I love that we get that new perspective.
Yes, 2025 is gonna be a fantastic year. So many good guests, all those good things. But you know what the other thing I'm feeling right now, Paige?
Hmm.
A little aches and pains. And I just kind of wake up, my foot hurts and then my back hurts. Now, I play a lot of pickleball.
I
So
know. Me too.
that
I'm impressed with your pickleball routine. It's really
thank you.
awesome.
Thank you. So that could have something to do with it, but I just want to be able to walk normal. Do you know what I mean? Like go upstairs
Yes.
and not my knees
I
creaking.
agree. I think those are things you should aspire to, day to day.
Exactly. I think sometimes my wife laughs because she can hear me coming down the stairs going, "Oh, ah, ooh, ah,"
Oh, yeah. When there's, like, vocalizations behind the walking, that might be an indication you need to slow down a little bit with the pickleball, but,
Oh,
as is,
no, no,
better.
absolutely, and then she goes, What's wrong? What happened?" I go, "Well, I just woke up." So
Oh, yeah. It's rough starting out in the morning, right? I get
it
it.
it is rough, but that's what's going on with me. Paige, what's going on with you? What's happening?
Oh, man. So let me tell you how proud I am about my kids. So, one
Yes.
of the cool things about the guest that we have on today is she believes that parents should be the number one teachers for their kids. And I love to see when my kids pick up on things like that. So, in my house, this may be shocking, I'm not the cook. Like, I cook to survive. Pizza rolls is a part of my normal diet. Like, this is just how I roll. My husband, on the other hand, is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
all four food groups, really intentional. So, he has taught our kids how to cook. So, literally, as we're speaking right now, my son upstairs, my youngest, my 11-year-old, is making butter chicken, like the
Mm.
Indian meal with the naan and
Wow.
everything, all because we are intentional with our kids at home and making sure that we're teaching them not just life lessons, not just things like that, but we're intentional about pouring into our kids in such a way that gives them those skills and we're showing them the ministry of presence. And so I love that we're speaking with Dr. Kelly Cagle today, who absolutely advocates for the fact that parents need to be the number one teacher for their kids. And so let me actually tell you a little bit more about Kelly because I would love for you to hear just some of her background. So
Yeah.
originally she is from Brazil, which in and of itself is super cool, right? I'm sure she
Totally
has
cool.
stories and the culture that comes from. She is a podcaster, researcher, and parent coach, which we're going to get into more about because I'm very fascinated about that. She has a PhD in education. Her podcast is I'm sorry, she hosts a podcast called Parenting IQ and is the author of God's Promises as Waves. I mean, she's just a wealth of knowledge. And so I'm so looking forward to having this conversation with her, as I'm sure our listeners are going to really enjoy some of the information she provides for us.
This sounds amazing. Paige, let's get to it. Let's get to your conversation now with Dr. Kelly Cagle on this edition of Embracing Your Season.
Well, Dr. Cagle, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Sure, Paige. Excited to be here with you today.
So, tell us a little bit about your background, your family, and kind of what led you into the field that you're in right now.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what you said. It's my family. First and foremost, whenever I look at my kids, I have 3 boys
Mm,
and they're 13, 8, and 6. And whenever I became a mom, all of the things I was a teacher back then, everything that I saw in the classroom, I was like, now it's personal. Like, that's
Right.
one thing to teach other people's kids, but now they're my own kids, and I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna do something better. We're gonna go hardcore, and bottom line, I got a PhD to do that, like to learn my
Wow.
own kids, you know.
Yes.
And so yeah, I was a teacher. Decided that I really just felt the Lord tugging at my heart to help kids in a more like a deeper way. When you're a teacher, you have all of these things you have to meet, these quotas you got to meet from the school district, and I wanted to connect with kids more. And so I got a master's in school counseling, and then it was like Holy Spirit knocking. Hey, listen, you're going to keep going to school. And I'm like, God, no, I'm not smart enough. I can't do that. I can't do it. And at that time, I had just had my third miscarriage. We had our first son was already born. I had experienced my third miscarriage, was
Mm,
finally carrying a baby, and I was like, "I can't keep going to school. This is a lot. I'm already like, I don't know, is this baby gonna be healthy?" And God was like, "Just listen to me. Just trust me. I got you." And so when I got my acceptance letter for my PhD program, I was 39 weeks pregnant with
oh,
the
girl.
third baby because God is so good. And not only did he give us a second, he gave us an icing on the cake, even a third one that
Nice.
we had no idea.
Oh,
Yeah, and so he's so good and he's so faithful, and that is basically my journey of going to school for a really long time.
yes.
I had 3 kids all along basically the whole time I've been in school, and they've watched me through and through, crying, picking myself up, rolling my sleeves
Mhm.
up, and getting back to work with the frustrations of doing all of it because that's just real life.
Yep.
And so that's my journey.
Wow. It is so funny because I totally relate to that as mamas that are getting the higher ed degrees is that my second, I knew my group counseling final was coming up and I knew this child was going to come during that time. So I was able to take the final a week before I gave birth to my second. And
Wow.
then I brought her the night everyone else was having finals. So I was able to show up and like, look what I made,
Oh, that's
guys.
awesome.
But I get that life, right? Like the
Yeah,
school and
yeah.
parenting and all those things.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can do hard things. That's what I'm gonna say.
That's
When we
right.
want something, we can do hard things. Mamas are we're warriors.
Yes,
It
preach
ain't
that.
always pretty, but we can do it.
That's right, preach that, God. Well, I love and the intro I even said this, is like you're a parenting coach. Can you tell
Mhm.
us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that again came about from just a need of my audience. You
Mm,
mentioned I have a podcast, and every time I would run into a listener, or I would be speaking at a parenting conference, or I speak quite often at MOPS groups and things like that, or Moms Co now.
mhm.
Anytime I came across moms, they were seeking for this one-on-one, almost like, "Hold my hand, help me do this." I even had some people ask I had 2 people ask me about, "Hey, can I just, like, drop my kid off with you during a week during the summer months, and you make all the changes and send them back home fixed for me?"
Well, is that
And I said
available? Absolutely.
I'm like, "Listen, that's a great thought. However, even if I fixed everything in your kid and sent them back, it boils down to you
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what you do day in and day out in your home." And
Mhm,
so that's where the coaching program and side of my company really came about was from conversations with moms that were just tired, exhausted. And I'm like, this is not how God intended motherhood to be. God
mhm,
intended for us to flourish. First of all, what a gift, what an honor it is to be entrusted with lives, right?
mhm.
We are raising humans that will one day be entrepreneurs and world changers, difference makers, touch the world in ways that we can't, but it's our seed. And so, why stay in this exhausted, tired, not tapping into our potential? And now, Paige, you said your youngest is 11, so you're not much older than me. You know that Pinterest and social media and this comparison constant situation that we battle, that we if we allow ourselves to go there, it makes us feel inadequate, less
Mhm.
than, like we are just not enough sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that's the background of getting to this place of coming alongside moms and say, "No, that's not the right life. Here, let's fix some things. Let's change some things
Mm.
because your home, your kids, your husband, you deserve to create a sweet rhythm in your home where everyone thrives."
Yeah, gosh, I love that. And it actually makes me think of culturally back in the biblical times, like we are designed for community. We are designed to parent in community. And I'm
Mhm.
sure there were still quote unquote Karens out there that were telling them how to raise their
Mhm.
kids in certain ways. But yet the reality is that you had your aunts and your grandmothers
Yeah.
and your own mother that was there around you, surrounding you to help you through this. Because the reality is, even you indicated, like I might be specializing in adolescence therapy, but when I started having my own adolescence, like, what
Yeah.
am I doing? It does not hit the same as it does when I help other kids, and so this reality of we don't know always what we're doing, making sure you have people around you that are pouring into you, giving you wisdom, but most importantly saying, "You're doing a good job. Like,
Mhm.
it's okay. You're doing great." So, I love that you offer that. What a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you. Every time I work with a coaching client, I cry very often, and then I
Mm,
tell my husband, and I tell my mother-in-law and my parents, I'm like, "You don't understand the feedback that I get." It's like it's life-changing for these families, and it warms my heart, and I'm so grateful to God that it's obviously not me because I can't do the work for them.
mhm.
It's just this partnership, as you're saying, of, "Hey, there are different ways to do this routine, this like instruction of bringing your kid along or teaching them to do this, that you can fix a whole lot of things, and it's really impactful for the entire family unit."
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the areas of specialty that I've read into some of your work and resources is ADHD and
Mhm.
really equipping parents for that. Can you speak a little bit to raising kids that may not even have that medical diagnosis, but the parents suspect?
Okay, I love that you brought that up because I don't have a medical diagnosis. My children don't have a medical diagnosis. But with all of the research that I do, there's no doubt. And honestly, it's what I tell my husband all the time. He always would make fun of me whenever I was a teacher. He's like, "Kelly, you went into the wrong field. You should have been a diagnostician." Because I wanted to diagnose, I wanted to pinpoint, I wanted to fix everything. I'm like, "This is what's wrong with this kid. And if they did this and they got this help." And my husband Josh would always laugh at that trait of mine. But honestly, when I started doing this work of researching ADHD and looking at families and the I think that the negative I believe that the enemy is really trying to rob from families, bring in this stigma, this
Mhm.
negativity of a label.
Mhm.
It's not a diagnosis that's crippling.
Right.
I believe I'm not anti-medication, first of all. I'll just make that disclosure. So if
Mhm.
you have a child who is diagnosed and you are on medication, fantastic. Hope that it's helping. I hope that you're seeing changes that are effective in your kids. So I believe in it. However, I also know, because I work with parents a lot, that a lot of these things, including in my own home, that I've done with some of my kids. Again, I have 3 boys who are super busy, constant, and also myself. Paige, I'll say this. When I was taking my master's degree and I needed to take the final exam, when you were bringing up your story about taking yours, it just
Mhm.
brought up all of these memories. So I failed my final exam for my master's 2
Hmm.
times because it
Oh,
was a
wow.
written test and I
Mhm.
couldn't pass. And then the program reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like to instead write a thesis, at least 15 pages, writing about the program and all this other stuff?" And I was like, "Absolutely, sign me up." So I chose to write a paper because test taking always burned me out. I couldn't do it.
Mm.
Then I had to take the GRE to get into my doctorate
Oof.
program.
Yes,
I
flashbacks.
again had to take it twice. Still didn't get a high enough grade to get into some of the most elite programs that I wanted to get into. But by God's grace, I'm so thankful that schools sometimes overlook those numbers and say,
Mhm.
"Hey, you're a good candidate regardless of your score." So here's the bottom line. Those signs that are personal to my story things that I have personally experienced in my home with my kids of cabinets being left open, of kids being tornado like every time they walk into a room. I know exactly the child who's been here. I know who ate this cereal bowl, who left it here, because
Uh-huh.
they are certain patterns of my kids. If you look at ADHD and the ADHD brain, a lot of these things line up. From
Mhm.
the time that they were infants, I see these behaviors in the kids. From the time that they started kindergarten, I saw certain things. And then it just so I try to be protective over my own children on the things that I share about which
Sure.
one of them does what or says what or, but bottom line is that it's not bad that I
Mhm.
failed those tests because I learned to self regulate, to overcome, to be resilient, to be a fighter,
Mhm.
obviously, through God's grace, but I overcame.
Yeah.
And I was one of the first ones, me and another guy were the very first ones in our cohort to finish our PhD program in 3 years. So it's a miracle, but God is good and he gives us strategies. And so that bottom line is that instead of you listening to people telling you, "Oh, your kid's so bad, they're so loud, they can't sit still in school, they can't pay attention, they hate school, your kid coming and telling you I can't make friends, everybody's mean to me." There are things that as parents we can help our kids, equip them with self-regulatory skills to make big impact in their lives,
Mm.
in their day-to-day. And so that's a huge portion that I felt the Lord calling me to come alongside parents and say, "Hey, here's some things you can do. Here's some routines that you can do in your home. Here's how you can motivate your kid. You can get to know your child at a deeper level."
I love that. So, of course, now you're gonna have to break down for the audience, our listeners, what are a few of those things that can start even just applying today with their kids in their homes?
Yeah, here's one that I do myself whenever I start noticing that I'm getting overwhelmed. So, self-regulatory skills, one of them is obviously emotional intelligence. So,
Mhm.
managing your emotions. So, whenever I start getting stressed out because I have a lot on my list, I have a let's backtrack. I have a list because if I don't add it to my list, it ain't getting
Right.
done.
Yep,
Right?
yep, agreed. Yeah.
So it's on my list to get it off my brain because my brain has a million tabs open constantly. But going back to this example, the moment I start getting overwhelmed, I take a brain break. And this, in fact, I just talked about ways that I stay motivated in 2025. I started a series, the Parenting IQ podcast, that we just released here in January, talking about 5 different strategies that I use. And this is one of them that I help myself stay motivated is brain breaks. Why?
Mm, that's good.
Because whenever I start getting overstimulated, right? Because that's essentially what's starting to happen to my brain. I need to reset my nervous system. So I take a brain break. And what is a brain break? I just step away from the task. And it sounds really counterproductive to walk away from a task that I need to get done. But what happens when I return to the task? I'm focused and I'm way more productive because I regulated my stress. I managed, took a brain break, and came back to it. And this is
Mhm.
also an amazing strategy to use with your kids during
Yeah.
homework, especially.
Well, that's what I was thinking is, like, implementing that. You parents can, identify when their kids are overstimulated. They start
Mhm,
getting irritable, they're getting frustrated, the way that they're snapping back at you in conversation, but also even just in how they're doing their work. So
mhm,
we can identify that. So your suggestion then is maybe tell them, "Maybe we need to take a break."
mhm,
Do you have any examples of brain breaks, that kids can do? Because 'Cause I'm thinking my kids would be like, "Oh, absolutely, I'll take a brain break," as they get on their device,
mhm,
to focus on other things. Is
mhm.
that something they can do as well?
So think about what you just said. You're taking a brain break. So what
Yes.
do you need to do? Your brain is being stimulated, is being on, is being turned on, being used. If we go straight to our screen, what's happening? Our
Mhm.
brain is still going. When we are sitting, okay, this is another medical finding. When we are sitting, what happens is our brain starts going to sleep because physically we're stopping moving our body. And so the best way for us to wake our brain up is to physically move. So the best break for your children or for yourself, jumping jacks,
Oh,
push-ups,
wow.
go out on the trampoline, not you, especially if you're a mom and you've birthed
That's
kids, you'll pee
right.
all over
Nope.
yourself.
We don't do that in this house.
I don't jump, but my kids, they're outside all the time. We homeschool and send them out all the time, especially if you have a boy. The physical release of testosterone is extremely important for them as their anger and angst starts building up. So send them on the trampoline. We go on a run quite often. I'm like, hey, boys, it's time to go on a run. And that's really, really healthy. So physical movement by far is the best brain break for yourself and for your kids.
Yeah. And so, of course, now I'm thinking we can implement this at home. We can do
Mhm,
this when they're doing their homework. My kids are in public school. And
mhm,
so I do appreciate in middle school and high school, they do have to transition classes by
mhm,
physically walking. But for like the elementary
mhm.
students, like any suggestions that we can even provide to the teachers to make them aware, these are some things my kid needs.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you, Paige, something that was super cool, blew my mind, and made me super proud. In the beginning of the episode, you're talking about your husband teaching your own children these cooking skills. And this is where the payoff starts coming in that you're like, I'm so glad that all of those years of like laboring over these things are finally paying off. So, my kid, I did not teach him this. This is something that he did on his own. He was in third grade. And we started a different model. This is before we started homeschooling. We had a model that he went to school some and he was home some. So it's called University Model School. And so the days that he was in school, he was in the classroom environment with a teacher. And then the days they were home, I was with him teaching him. And so I started studying him as a learner, as a student, his behaviors and his natural tendencies. And this is my oldest. And one time I had to tell the story to set this up. So I was reading a passage to him and he's just kicking the soccer ball, just nonstop.
Sounds
I'm
like
like,
my house. Yes.
will you just stop and listen? And he goes, Mom, you just said blah, 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 and like verbatim said what I just read to him. Light bulb. And I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
wow. So he actually learns when he's moving. He's engaged when he's moving. I will not get into this, but this is a whole nother layer of research that I do. This is actually included in the Bible study, God Promises His Waves, that I wrote for kids. I include this research in very kid friendly language because I saw the freedom it brought to my own kids.
Hmm.
My son, the days that he was in school, asked his own teacher if he could sit in the back. Again, self regulatory skill, advocating for himself. I had nothing to do with this. If he could sit in the back of the class. And when she wasn't teaching and he started getting the jitters, if he could stand up and stretch.
Hmm. That's
And the
great.
teacher said, yeah, go for it. And so she told me, hey, Levi's constantly in the back of the room, or like that's where he sits, but he's always up, stretching, getting up. And then he's like, okay, I'm good, reset. So that
Hmm.
I cannot take credit for it. My own kid came up with that one. But it's a wonderful, easy way that kids, especially in elementary, like you said, elementary years, that you can empower them for that brain break. Just get up, stretch a minute. You know, the kids constantly getting up to sharpen the pencil or to throw a little tiny wrapper away. That's what they're needing.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
even telling you, that's exactly what they're needing.
Yeah. And I love the combination that your kiddo, which we can teach our kids, is to recognize their body signs. Like your body is telling you something. And it can be whether it starts with thoughts or it starts with the body. We can help them identify those things. And then we teach them the advocacy skills, which comes to be so powerful in the way that they even communicate to friends, to relatives,
Right.
to community members. But I also love the idea of teaching them that it's okay that their body needs that. I know one of the things that I really promote in my own kids, because I have a learning disability, so school was always very hard for me. The way I learned was harder and different than most of the my schoolmates is that that's the way that God made me. This is the
Mhm.
way he made my brain, and this is the way I have to learn. So having our kids understand that this is designed by the creator,
Right.
still responsibilities,
Mhm.
still being self-regulated, but the fact that their bodies are unique, their brains are unique, to allow them to embrace that as identity piece, I think is another really big piece as well. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's freedom. The word that kept coming up to me is where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, and the Holy
Mm,
Spirit lives inside of us. And so we are free to be exactly as you said, with self control, because fruit of the Spirit, what is the last one? Self
that's right.
control.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
know, we have love, we have joy, we have peace, and all of these others, and we have self control. And so,
Yeah.
included in our family vision statement, which if you don't have one, I highly recommend writing one because you constantly come back to, well, what is our family vision statement? Who are we about? Who are the Kegels about? And these boys can tell you, my 6-year-old can tell you exactly what that is. Included in our family vision statement is each one of the fruit. Why? Because I want them to know ways that God is calling us to live, self control being one of them. Yes,
Mhm.
they are boys. Yes, they're rough. Yes, they're tough. Yes, they're loud, but we behave in self control because He calls us to that.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
that's freedom, right?
Right.
There are ways that there are environments and times that you can go and you can be super loud when you're having fun, but at the same time, there are other times that you have to know when it's not appropriate. And that's
Mhm.
part of the regulating and learning and exploring these different ways about you that I believe bring freedom to us as moms and dads, and even our kids when they know this about themselves.
Mhm.
You can just be whole.
Love that. Yeah, that's so good. And what a good encouragement as well, right? Like it's not all just dependent on us. We get to be whole and free from those things.
Mhm.
So, speaking to those parents out there that it's just busy, life is busy, especially when you have kiddos that are in activities, extracurriculars, going to church, even more than Sundays. It's just a lot. And so,
Mhm.
parents can get overwhelmed, even burned out. So, do you have any suggestions for them to just help them in this season of being a parent?
This is a lot of the work that I do with my own clients is looking at your schedule, looking at your life. And, you know, the minimalist movement was huge a few years ago and it was pretty extreme. And everybody's like, that's crazy. I cannot believe that you have 3 plates. But what I learned when I started studying that movement and the heart behind it is that brain space is important. And so, same thing in motherhood, in parenting, in our kids' lives, is leaving space that's free.
Hmm.
You don't have to fill your life and every second of every day with something. And so keeping life simple. There are seasons. One of the rules that I've always had in my life is the kids could only do one sport at a time, you know? Because if you're going to this and this and this, and as you mentioned, you're at school all day, and then on Wednesdays you have youth, and you want
Mhm.
your kids to be involved in youth because it's such a rich season in their lives and they need other people to pour into them. But then you also have that interfering with, well, soccer game here and here, and their schedule's just chaotic. When do they even have time to create, to think, to rest, to recharge if they're constantly on the go?
Mhm.
So it's also a disservice for them if we feel like we have to have them in something. Maybe there are seasons in your life that you think, hey, I have a few books here behind me, and one of them is Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. And thinking about boundaries, maybe we've just lacked boundaries in our lives and we've said yes to too much. I tell my clients this all the time. Sometimes even good things deserve a no for certain
Mhm.
seasons.
Yeah, that's
Even
good.
if it's serving in church, sometimes you have to say no. I was on the worship team at my church whenever I started my PhD and had nursing babies that didn't like to sleep and a toddler that was just so difficult. Guess what? Worship, the worship team just got put on hold for a season. A good thing, a talent that God gave me,
Mhm.
but he knew he called me to this. And so he's going to honor. I need to honor these different seasons. And so I think that that's a huge thing. Don't feel like everything deserves a yes.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good word. Well, as we're ending our time, I would love for people to find your resources and how they can connect with you. Would you like to share that with our listeners?
Yeah, sure thing. So you can head over to my website, drkellycagle.com. And you all of my resources, the Bible study, more about the coaching program that I offer, is all there. Podcast, everything is there. But then if you are on social media on Instagram, same name, Dr. Kelly Cagle, that's where I'm most active. I engage a lot with my audience. I share so many tips and strategies for the tired ADHD mom. So
Yeah, let's go.
whether you have a diagnosis or not, it doesn't matter because, again, there are strategies and tools that we all need.
Yes.
Whether we know our kids have it or not, or we think they might, it doesn't matter. So, Dr. Kelly Cagle at all the platforms, that's where you can find me.
Ugh, I love that. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today and giving us some of these practical tools, as well as to find more information about that so that we can truly just help our kids become who God designed them to be
Mm.
most effectively. Like, that's it. That's why
Yep,
we do it.
that's right.
So beautiful. So, thank you so much again for joining us today.
No problem, Paige. Thanks for having me.
Friends, what a fun conversation. I enjoyed my time with Dr. Kelly Cagle. I think she had amazing wisdom. I just love it when people come on and they have practical tools because I'm like, just give me all the practicality. I don't want the fluff. I want the practicality so I can implement this in my own family today. So, for our takeaways today, I've invited my producers, Mike Segovia and Ariel Daves. And Ariel, you look fire today. For those that are
Thank
on
you,
the
Paige.
Homeward YouTube channel, you can tell she came on the front end when I was like, and my mic producer was talking to Dr. Kelly, and I was like, Ariel, I was like whispering, Ariel, you look so pretty today. I mean, like completely unprofessional as I bring on a new guest, but we got to support our ladies, right? Let's
Well, thank
go.
you. Yes, yes, we do have to. Thank you, Paige.
So I really did enjoy the conversation with Dr. Kelly. I have some takeaways. What are some of the things that you guys really resonated with?
Ariel, what do you think? I want to hear from you first.
Well, one of the takeaways was towards the end of what she was talking about, and when Dr. Cagle was saying, that certain things deserve a no, even if
Mm,
they're
yeah,
good in
that's
certain
good.
seasons. That's something that I've had to learn to do in my day-to-day life. Something that my dad always taught me was filter and focus. And if it's not part of the vision, filter it out because we have a vision, we have a
Wow.
mission to continue. So
That's a good word.
I
Yeah.
I really resonated with what she said there. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, for me is the whole brain break and like managing your emotions because like Dr.
Mhm.
Cagle was saying, Paige, I have so many open windows in my
Mhm.
brain and so many things going on that it's hard for me to just kind of stop. And so I
Mhm.
really liked it when she said to take a brain break is to actually step away from that task. And,
Yeah.
and I've done that before when I'm producing something and, I'm thinking about all this other stuff. I'll just stop, step out of my office, walk away, do some jumping jacks or whatever, and then go back in for a reset. And I find that I'm really more refreshed. So I love that. I love the brain breaks because, Paige, we need those.
I mean, agreed. Scientifically, it is proven, right?
Mhm.
I encourage anybody, but parents especially, to go look up PET scans, PET scans. So these are brain scans that show activity in your brains. I love it, especially those that have some miseducation about anxiety and depression. Again, we use those words flippantly. So there is a medical diagnosis for anxiety and depression and ADHD. Again, that's another one we're just tossing out. Everybody has ADHD, right? No, legitimately, our brains function differently, and those PET scans have this ability to really highlight where are they overstimulated. And so for Dr. Cagle to say to physically remove yourself, not
Mhm.
only from the task, but to physically act out some of
Yeah.
that energy to reset your brain, I love the practicality of that. Of course, my concern is for those kiddos. I'm looking at my boys like they could never just sit still in a classroom setting.
Mhm.
But this is what I love about educators. So shout out to educators is that they are reading the science as well. So they know that bringing in like a yoga ball, for instance, my kiddo sat on that yoga ball. They got to switch it around the room and he got to sit on that. And that was really helpful for his brain. So now it's normalizing the fact that kids have to move to
Mm.
learn. When I was in grad school, for instance, I know that I have ADHD tendencies. And so my brain can't always focus. I would knit. Now, I was like 1,000 months pregnant, so I could barely move, at that point. But I would be able to take the crochet needle and I would knit while I was listening to the lecture. That helped my brain focus on the content. So
Mm.
that's what I tell parents to say, if your child struggles in these areas, figure out fidget. I know they use fidget spinners. They have these little
Yes. Mhm.
squishy things. They have the chairs that you sit on. Educators and administrators in school systems are much more open to using these things because science is telling us this is what our kids need. Now, on top of that, this was in my TEDx talk, and these are the talks that I have actually pretty frequently, is the impact technology has on all of our brains, friends. All of us, adults and kids, that the phone in and of itself, TV in itself, is overstimulating our brains. So in essence, we are all becoming ADD. We constantly need that stimulus in order to stay focused. So now that we're using technology in the school system more frequently, now they're being compounded by this need to be stimulated. So using some of these practical tools like standing up, walking away, stretching, teaching our kids to advocate and recognize their body cues, that's going to be huge. That's going to be transformational. And not only the school system, but behaviorally as well. Because we don't want our kids to come home from school having a referral because they couldn't sit still in class and that ended up making them irritable or, talking back to a teacher. This will actually mitigate and reduce some of those negative interactions, all because they're listening to their bodies and adults are respecting kids and their need to move and do some of those activities. So that was a big, big takeaway for me today as well. And this is my life. Like, I have 4 kids. Everyone knows that. I feel like I talk about them all the time because, that's my season of life right now. This is what we're doing. But I have one child who was diagnosed with ADHD when he was
Mm.
in, I think, 4th grade. And what ended up happening, this was in 2020. And so we had finally gotten him a diagnosis. We had finally had a medical intervention. So in his case, he was taking medication. We saw an instantaneous change in his behavior and his ability to focus. So we were able to get him back academically where he needed to be. It just happened to be 2020. So we ended up doing all the homeschooling stuff, the e-learning stuff, which set all our kids back, right? But
Mhm.
the truth is when we as parents advocate for our kids as well, get them the services they need because their brains are uniquely designed and they learn uniquely, we can all partner together to really make school a good experience, potentially even a fun experience. I know my kids would be like, school is never fun, but it can be. It can be really a delightful season for them if we're advocating and we're teaching them to advocate for themselves. So that's some really good takeaways that we had today, guys. I really appreciate the listeners tuning in. Always at Embracing Your Season, we have great conversations that hopefully equip you and encourage you. We would love for you to stay tuned next time to another edition of Embracing Your Season.